I want to introduce you to a beautiful perennial, a beautiful ornamental that might be one of the most important medicines you can have in your medicine cabinet. So I'm Dr. Patrick Jones from the Homegrown Herbalist School of Botanical Medicine, and this is Elecampane, Inula helenium. This is a real rock star of a medicinal plant. And these are just little guys. This is the first year these have come up. We've just recently planted this bed. I have another bed of them on another property that's, they're this tall. They get much taller. It's a perennial plant, and so the first year, he's kind of trying to get his feet on the ground and get some structure built in the roots, so he's not putting as much upstairs. But like I say, when this is a mature plant, it'll be twice as tall and twice as big with the leaves. Really a beautiful ornamental, really an amazingly stunning plant, just to have to make your life happy visually. But medicinally, it's a really fantastic plant. The name Elecampane comes from the Latin word for bell, campania, right? And it's because these little flowers, if you hold them upside down, they're sort of bell-shaped. That's how botanists name things, is by shapes and structures and things that reminds them of. The Latin species name, Inula helenium, is interesting too. Inula comes from just the Greek word for this style of plant. That's what they called it, was Inula. But helenium comes from Helen of Troy. And they say, the legend is, that when Helen of Troy was kidnapped by Paris and hauled away to Troy, that she wept, and that the teardrops fell to the earth, and from those little teardrops sprang up this plant. And it's interesting how we as humans have to explain things. We have to have reasons for things. And one of the things that this plant is good for is, sadness and depression and homesickness and, unfulfilled longings. And, we can make up a myth for that, or we can explain the biology of it, which is that Elecampane is a fantastic food for the microflora in your gut, the beneficial bacteria in your gut. Well, what does that got to do with being sad and homesick and depressed? Well, it has to do with the fact that the bacteria in our gut, the beneficial microorganisms in our gut, produce tons and tons of chemistry that benefits the nervous system. They say something like 80% of the serotonin in our bodies is produced not by our brain, but by the bugs in our gut and other neurotransmitter facilitators and chemistry that just makes your brain feel better and feel happier and balances everything. And so that's one thing that those bugs in your gut do. Another thing is they decrease inflammation generally. They moderate and modulate and govern or produce chemistry that governs immune function. They improve digestion. They improve all kinds of things. And so those little bugs in our guts outnumber us like 10 to 1. The number of cells you have in your body, there's 10 of those guys for every one of you. Maybe we should feed them. Maybe we should be nice to them because they're doing so many amazing things. And the root of this plant, Elecampane, is a tremendous food. It contains a soluble fiber called inulin. And notice that the name of the flower is Inula, that's the genus. And I don't know if the name of the fiber came from the plant or if the name of the plant came from the fiber, but there's obviously some clear connection there. Inulin is a soluble fiber, and it just means that it's one that can dissolve. A lot of the fibers that the gut bugs love are insoluble fibers, right? that we can't even digest as mammals, but they digest and really need. This one's a soluble fiber, and it's basically just a long chain of fructose molecules, which is a sugar. And when we eat that, it sort of converts into a gel in the gut. And that gel is an extraordinary food for the gut bacteria. Also, that gel decreases cholesterol because it absorbs and binds the cholesterol and keeps it from getting into your bloodstream. It decreases sugar uptake by our system, so it's, can help with weight loss. It makes you feel more full because that gel takes up a lot of space when it gets hydrated. So that can help with weight loss. It's not like a magic pill that if you start taking Elecampane root, you're going to lose 100 pounds. But it helps your body to not absorb so much of the sugar and simple starches that we're eating in our modern diet. So that's great. Let's talk a little bit about how you grow it. Okay, so this plant is really easy to grow. It's very vigorous. It's not very picky. It loves full sun. If it just gets partial sun, it'll be okay with that too, but it loves full sun. I mean, look at that flower. He's telling you what he wants, right? He wants to be your sunshine, so he better get some sunshine. It's a full sun plant, if possible. It's a light germinated seed. And what does that mean? Well, that means it actually needs sunlight to germinate. A lot of plants, need to be under enough dirt to have enough moisture and enough, loving and cuddling from the earth to germinate. He doesn't want that. He wants sunshine. So the seeds won't even germinate if you bury them too deep. So you just sprinkle them on top of the dirt, and you put just a little tiny dusting of nothing and pat them down and say nice things to them, and they'll pop up if you want good germination. If you plant them too deep, you'll have much less germination. They like fast-draining soil, but honestly, we don't have particularly fast-draining soil in Idaho. We got a lot of clay. They could care less. They're very forgiving. They're very tolerant. If they're getting enough water and they're getting enough sunlight, they're going to be happy and they're going to grow. Like I said, the root is the medicine. And so on a perennial plant, this is a perennial. It'll come back from the same root every year. You're going to want to let it, mature a little bit before you harvest those roots. You're going to want those roots to be 2 or 3 years old before you start harvesting, so they're really rich and big enough to bother with. You can also, I always feel a little bit guilty when the root's the medicine because you're digging up the roots and that plant's done. Well, the good news is that this plant propagates very readily from root divisions. So don't take all the root, pull some out, cut it up, put a few good pieces back in, and it'll make that plant will come right back, and you've got your medicine. It's a little bit oily because of all the essential oils. And when I mean oily, I don't mean it, tastes or feels oily, but it's a little bit hydrophobic. It doesn't like water. And so if you're making a tincture from Elecampane, if it's just Elecampane, it might be beneficial to use a little bit stronger alcohol. So instead of using vodka, which is 50% alcohol or 100 proof, use some Everclear, which can be 80 or 90% alcohol, right? And so just, you can certainly tincture it in vodka, but it'll be a little stronger, a little more beneficial if you tincture it in Everclear. So Elecampane, really a fabulous plant, really a must-have in your quiver of medicinal arrows that you have for remedies for things for folks you love. I'm Dr. Patrick Jones. If you have questions, poke them in the comments. If you have things you're using Elecampane for, poke it in the comments. I'd love to learn things from you too. I'm Doc Jones from the Homegrown Herbalist School of Botanical Medicine. Have a great day.